Hello there, welcome to Plus Talk on Plus Life, where we are all about turning positive into a plus. We are just days away from a major election here in the United States. So I am joined by our friend from GLAAD, DaShawn Usher. He's an award-winning advocate. He's a published researcher and a celebrated leader within the LGBTQ plus community, as well as HIV prevention. As I said, he works for GLAAD as their prevention officer, community of colors. DaShawn, good to see you, mate.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thanks for taking the time. You guys must be manic over there at GLAAD with everything that is going on right now. But I want to talk specifically about election. We did an episode about this 2 weeks ago, but I think, as we get closer and closer to election day, it's important to keep talking about these topics, especially ones that relate to those of us living with HIV and AIDS. So I want to, right off the bat with you, get your thoughts on the key issues people living with HIV and AIDS should be concerned most about with this upcoming election.
Yeah, so I would say that at GLAAD, we've been literally tracking the election probably since we knew that it was going to happen 4 years ago, but really kicking into high gear to just make sure that people, one, are registered to vote, know their status around their registration, and then encouraging their friends and family and networks of folks to also make sure that they're registered. And now we're on a voting plan, and so really encouraging people so what time are you going to vote, where are you going to vote, is really important. And so if you go to glaad.org/action, that gives you part of those steps. And it's really just thinking that some of the key issues that is where HIV is wrapped up in is going to be centered around health. And so thinking about what politicians, particularly at the top level all the way down to your local level, where are their stances when it comes to healthcare and health, because those are going to be the biggest impacts that we see when it comes to people living with HIV, particularly because if someone is voting against laws or amendments that could either expand, take away affordable healthcare for all, that also will ultimately affect how folks are able to access healthcare.
Yeah, well, repealing the Affordable Care Act is something we're hearing a lot about in the news these days. We've been hearing about it for the last 4 years with the current administration, but with everything that's going on in light of the Supreme Court and that nomination that's coming up, just how serious is it really? If they are able to pull back the Affordable Care Act, when it comes to those of us living with HIV/AIDS, do we then fall into that bucket of people who have pre-existing conditions that won't be covered? What happens to our medicine and our prescriptions? What's at stake for us here?
Yeah, so it's actually a lot at stake. And so part of the staking begins with the census. And so part of that is thinking that if you, this year is pivotal for voting and for the census, because with the census, it's going to be a measure of the allocation of resources. And so particularly among states. And so when you think about states that have programs like ADAP, so the AIDS Drug Assistance Program, that's money that is being allocated to that. People that have the Ryan White programs, whether it's Part A through D, that's going to be determined by, one, the census and the resources that are allocated within those states. But if you have lawmakers that, again, if they're voting against healthcare and if they're voting against other issues that affect you and the people that you love, then that will make it harder for you to possibly access any of those programs. When dollars come into the state, they could be reallocated to other line items that serves. And so that's why it's important to think about who's on your city council, right? Because that's going to determine a lot on the local level about what you have access to, and then thinking about, again, who's in your senates, and those other Senate members that are really important when it comes to that local jurisdiction zoning.
Yeah, we're of course we're all talking about a presidential election, but there are other quite big elections going on statewide in a lot of states, and a lot of ballots on there that matter, especially for those of us who have quote unquote pre-existing conditions. What about the nationwide plan for PrEP? This is something that the current administration has talked about. They've certainly, talked about wanting to end the pandemic, the HIV epidemic, rather, quite a bit. We know that the current administration made strides in sort of, making access to PrEP a lot easier. Does either candidate that you know of have a plan for lowering drug costs? And what is their track record on proving free PrEP or making drugs more affordable?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to like PrEP, essentially like the plan, it's like some states have actually been able to be a little bit more innovative than others. And again, this is where the lawmakers and like on those local levels, I keep bringing it down to like how important it is for like to understand like how those local elected officials affect so much of like what you can like tangibly see in your lives. And so when we think about like on like the more federal level, it would have to be a plan that like again like looks at like how are people going to afford it or access it, and if there's like conversations or deals with like pharmaceutical companies to bring down the drug price, then that's great in one aspect of it. But then it's also thinking about like where else in what areas does it impact. And so when the current administration was talking about that they wanted to like end the epidemic for HIV, like that was happening before the folks at the White House got there. And the reason how come it hasn't happened just yet because it was like a 2020, now we're here, and then now it's a 2030. And a lot of it is that like we won't ever end the epidemic if we aren't actually putting resources to like the particular problems, and also knowing that like research is important, right? And so this is how we even got to the conception and the realization of PrEP. This is how we got to the realization of undetectable equals untransmittable. And so it's the research also that's like really, really important. But if the current administration are making cuts when it comes to like research, also, then it will sort of kind of put a delay in how much farther we can advance and like continue to go along inside of the world. But then I know that this is also domestically, but thinking globally, right? And so if there's pulling funding from resources in other countries like PEPFAR and underfunding or cutting things, particularly like when it comes to sexual health, reproductive health, that affects like people across the board, then HIV is still like on that chopping block when it comes to like those particular issues.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people out there now that go, oh, well, we've got a pill, so don't really need to worry about it so much. What can we do? What can we do to keep and make sure that HIV/AIDS it remains in the conversation post-election? What's the most effective way to be heard? I know GLAAD recently, over the summer, had some results, of pretty startling results of a study that you guys did surrounding HIV and AIDS in this country and people's opinions, right?
Yeah. We had did the State of HIV Stigma survey, and that looked at Americans' opinions on HIV stigma particularly. And it was interesting because there was a large percentage of Americans that agreed and believed in that like it's unfair to discriminate on somebody living with HIV, but then also like admitted to having stigmatizing views for people living with HIV. But the biggest shocker, I think, was that like at least I think like over 90% of people wanted to be more informed about HIV. And this is where like we like plug in like fear over facts, right? And so it's like if you're coming from a place of fear, then it sort of kind of perpetuates the stigma. And we won't be able to like advance as a community, particularly when it comes to HIV stigma. And so that was one of the things that definitely the research like showed us, but it's also understanding that there is an information gap. And that the more that we're able to educate people and the more that we're able to have these conversations about HIV, the more that we can normalize the conversations and people can understand and not actually fear HIV.
Yeah, and we certainly, and this just all goes to amplify how important it is to get out and vote. vote early and vote now, because these are the kind of topics and conversations that really whoever takes us into the next administration and the next cycle is going to have to look at, and we want to make sure that we are taken care of. DaShawn Usher, always great to catch up with you, my friend. Thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, sir.
Thank you. You enjoy yours. Talk to you later.
Thank you. That's going to do it for this episode of Plus Talk. Now, remember, if you want to find out anything more about what we've discussed today, you can head to our website, pluslifemedia.com, and be sure to follow us across social media at PlusLifeMedia. From myself and from DaShawn Usher, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.